Welcome, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Manuel Eisner. I'm the director of the Institute of Criminology and the Wilson Professor of Criminology. And it's really a great pleasure both to welcome those of you who are here in the room, but also those of you who are joining online. And we have another 22, 25 participants who are joining us online. Just a quick housekeeping note on the unlikely event that there is a fire alarm. First of all, the exit is where you just came in, and then there are fire exits on both sides of the corridor. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Zora Hauser. Dr. Hauser studied international relations and political science at the Libera Università Internazionale degli Studi Sociali Guido Carli, which is in Rome. She then completed a PhD at the University of Oxford on the topic of Mafia expansion in new territories, the Ndrangheta in Germany. From 2022 to 2024, she was a postdoctoral research fellow in the Department of Sociology at the University of Oxford. On the 1st of January this year, she started a 3-year Leverhulme Early Career Fellowship at the Institute of Criminology. Now, for those of you who don't know about the Leverhulme Early Career Fellowships, they are very prestigious fellowships that allow early career academics to develop a basis for future academic careers. The title of that project is Mafia Diplomacy, the External Relations of Organized Crime. Dr. Hauser brings unique experience conducting fieldwork with hard-to-reach populations. I mean, if you think about doing research on organized crime, you can easily imagine what that means. I'm not going to go into further details. As well, in systematic qualitative analysis of very complex, long court records and court files. Beyond her academic research, she's also been advising policymakers in the UK, in Germany, Switzerland, Italy, and across Europe on issues related to criminal markets and organized crime. Today, Dr. Hauser presents key findings from her new book, Mafia Expansion, the Ndrangheta in Established Democracies. At this moment, I wanted to wave a copy of the book to you, but unfortunately, I forgot to take it with me. So just imagine the book that I'm waving, but this looks very similar to the book title. It's published at Oxford University Press in the Clarendon series, which is kind of like a criminology series that's jointly edited by University of Oxford, Cambridge, and Economics. Zora, it's a great pleasure to have you here. All is yours.
Is it any better at all?
Somebody seems to put those of you online. Please mute yourself. That was effective.
So thank you very much, Manuel, for the kind introduction, and thanks for taking the blame. The true story is that I forgot to bring a copy of the book. But thank you very much for having me here today. It's quite a special moment for me because I've joined this institute in January. Then I had an accident. I broke my hip and basically never turned up here. Now I'm back and I'm really ready to start being here and interacting with all of the students here as well that are here, the staff members, of course. And thank you for everyone who is joining online as well. Just for me to understand a little bit, how many of you are familiar with the Ndrangheta? Not those that know the Ndrangheta because I've told them about it every single day. So not that many, and maybe even those of you that are familiar or have heard the term do not know too much about this mafia. So what I thought was useful before getting into really the nitty-gritty of what this presentation is about is to tell you just a little bit about this organization. It is one of the traditional Italian mafia organizations. It has been active, as far as we can tell and document, at least 150 years, perhaps a bit longer. It comes from this region here in Italy, in the very south of Italy. You might have heard more about the Cosa Nostra, which comes from this part of Sicily. So that's the most famous Italian mafia. We do have in Italy other mafias as well that are considered traditional. We have the Camorra roughly in this area, and we have more recently the Sacra Colonna Unita and other mafias that have developed in this area. Some new mafias in the area of Rome and throughout Italy a little bit, but these are really the big mafia organizations. In the Ndrangheta, the Calabrian mafia, because this region is called Calabria, is one of the largest today and considered by prosecution and police among the most active. We're speaking about roughly 150 clans. Those are groups, typically led by a boss, 10,000 members. And what really brings this organization together is a mix of ritual, rules, and organization that actually allows these 150 clans to more or less nowadays peacefully cohabit with one another. That was not always the case. We had two important mafia wars in the south of Italy, in Calabria, where we had a level of murders that are very similar to civil wars. But now this is not the case anymore. It is not the case anymore because we have an organization which is able, to a certain extent, of course, this doesn't mean that this organization doesn't use violence anymore, but keep this kind of fights under control. This is San Luca, or this view on San Luca. It's from my fieldwork in 2020. The first time I went there, it was 2017. And it's a village of 3,000 inhabitants, 3,000 and something. It is considered to be, it is, in fact, the historical core stronghold of the Ndrangheta. There's no mayor there. Nobody even ran for a mayor because they were scared of being involved in politics in that area. Here we have the same families that existed at the end of the 19th century still there today. The same families that we will be talking about later in the talk. One more minute just to speak about something that I think is very often underestimated about this organization is something that you can see here. This is a code. This is an oath that is written down by one of the mafiosi. And we found around 30 codes. Not me. Authorities found 30 codes. The first one in 1888, the last one in 2013 in San Luca. Again, so in the same little village that I just talked about. These codes are important because they basically give the organization an identity around rituals, but they also give the organization norms and rules. So they create a normative community. And they create, as a result of that, a reputation towards the outside. A reputation that goes beyond the singular group. So we have these 150 clans, right? It's a reputation from which all of the 150 clans benefit from, but it goes beyond the single clan. It's a reputation that is attached to the Ndrangheta itself as a criminal organization that exists since 150 years and has been active throughout this period uninterruptedly. So this is really important. In a little bit, you will realize why. And one of the most important bits and pieces of this, let's say, backbone of rules and rituals is the affiliation ritual. Is when a member, an initiate, or like a future member, is not a member yet, is joining the organization. So what we have is typically a ritual. The initiate is present with a number of other already affiliates, member of the organization. He cuts his finger and a little bit of blood should go on a picture of San Michele, of San Michael, and then this picture is burned. Just one other 10 seconds. I should not digress too much because I don't have all the time in the world, but I find it interesting. Do you know why we use San Michael? San Michael is the saint that protects the Ndrangheta according to the members of the Ndrangheta. He stands for justice. He is also the saint protector of the police. And it tells you a little bit about these organizations, how they understand themselves, and how they, to a certain extent, we will talk about this, are perceived by the population as well. This is one version of the oath that they are reciting typically. There are many different ones, but I chose this one because it gives us really an idea of what it means to join this organization, which is a rebirth. Before the family, this is the initiate who has to say this. Before the family, this is not the initiate. This is the question that is asked to the initiate. Before the family, parents, sisters, brothers, comes the interest and honor of the society. The society is a criminal organization. They call it society when they refer to itself. From now on, the society will be your family. So you see they are getting into that new family that is substituting the blood family that they have. Although this is a mafia that is very much based on blood ties as well. As you shall be loyal to the society will be loyal to you and will assist you in times of need. Are you ready for this? Do you take the oath? And the initiate is confirming. Typically at that point, you can't say no. So but you see also it comes with duties and rights. It's really important. So as a member of this organization, you will be taken care of. For example, when you're sent to prison, your family will be taken care of and you will be taken care of. But you're also requested to basically obey quite blindly to the society, to the organization, and to be loyal to it. This is an original picture of one of these St. Michael's images that has been burned. So this exactly comes from a ritual. And what I find interesting about this picture is that, in fact, it was not found in Calabria, in Italy. It was found in Duisburg, in Germany, in 2007. And it was found in the pockets of a person that has been murdered on the streets, together with around 5 men, all aged between 16 and 25, so young men. They were having dinner. They were executing a ritual. They were affiliating a member into the Ndrangheta. And then when they left the restaurant, a sicario came by to, in fact, shot them to death. And the police intervened. Within a few days, it became clear that it was a feud between the Ndrangheta clans. Only that it was not happening in Calabria, not happening in Italy, but happening in Germany. Why is that the case? And pretty much this is what we're going to talk about today. Why is it that such a, to a certain extent, rural organization that has existed for so many years, is so much connected to the roots in Calabria, is now suddenly executing people in Germany? And why do we find this organization beyond Germany in many other countries around the world? This is a map, 2016, it's been published. I know the authors, they are updating it as we speak. So next year, likely we will have an updated version of the map. I asked them how it looks like, pretty much the same, with a little bit more of presence of the Ndrangheta in West Africa. What you can see here in dark blue is the areas in which, according to this study, we can find most of the presence of this criminal organization. And we see among them countries such as Canada, Australia, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, Spain as well. With the exception of Colombia, what you can see here is countries very strongly located in Europe, countries that we could call, and we will come back to that because it's the title of the presentation, established democracies. Very specific settings that we would not expect a mafia organization necessarily being there, and certainly not being entrenched there. So this is the puzzle, and this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to first start by looking at concepts. We're going to look a little bit at the theory, because this is not just an empirical puzzle, it is also a theoretical puzzle. We are going to then try to solve the puzzle in 3 steps. We're going to look at how to document mafia presence. We're going to give a framework of mafia expansion. And then hopefully I can give you an explanation of why this is the case and how we can actually deal with this puzzle, conclusion, and questions to follow. It's not probably what you're used to as a talk, so you will not have something like, oh, this is my data, this is the methodology, this is the framework, and these are my results. But I hope you will find all of it in here. So we're going to go through the data, we're going to go through the methodology, and we're going to go and discuss the results as well. So what are we speaking about when we're speaking about Ndrangheta? By now, from an empirical point of view, you've seen a little bit what Ndrangheta looks like. But from a more, let's say, theoretical point of view or analytical point of view, we are speaking about a category. It's a category of organizations, mafia organizations, which are a very specific form of organized crime. Why are they different from other forms of organized crime? Because they intervene in markets or in communities, regulating behaviors and relationships. Simple terms, if I have a drug dealer on the street, this is not what I'm talking about. The mafia would not be a drug dealer on the street. The mafia would basically decide who is going to be the drug dealer on the street. It's going to say, you, and you can sell. Most likely, they're going to also intervene on prices, not necessarily. They're going to charge a tax to allow you to work and deal on those streets. They're going to protect you as well if some other dealer is going to come on the street and wants to deal and be competition to you. So in this sense, that's why we are looking at this organization as basically being part of the same analytical category as states. What they do is they regulate. They're not necessarily or not only involved in the economic activity itself. Okay, are you with me? This is going to become important in a second. So that's why we are looking at these type of groups, and we call them governance type groups, right? Because we are within that type of activity which is governing either markets, territory, or communities, people, places, or the economy. And this is why people like me, I come from political science, moved into sociology, now I'm here at criminology, I'm interested in these groups, right? Because it's more than just a crime. These people, they operate within the economy, they regulate the economy, these people operate at a political level. They basically intervene at the political level. So they have a sort of an additional qualification to just operating within a field which is illegal. Of course, mafia groups are not the only groups in this category. We can look at insurgents, paramilitary groups, sometimes terrorist groups, depending on how we label the different groups. The point is, again, that we're looking at groups that are governing. And this is very specific. And what that means is that they also typically came into being and are resilient in very specific settings. In settings of inefficient institutions, uncertainty, large and unregulated, either illegal markets or also legal markets, typically situations where we have low levels of trust within society towards the state, corruption, economic fragility, and we could go on and forth with this. There's a whole list, but there's also a very huge scholarship on this. And while, of course, different people have looked at different parts of the world and emphasized different elements, they roughly all agree. And why do we find these organizations in these situations, in these specific settings or historical junctures? Because there's a void that is left by the state, so by the legal part of the equation. And so who is coming in to fill that void is, in fact, this illegal actor. So, and this is another point which I think is incredibly important to always remember, is that ultimately, as much as we don't like them maybe, or as much as we might morally want to distance ourselves from them, they offer service for which there is a demand. That's it. A woman in North Colombia, which is another area that I looked at when I talk about this today, that is at risk of being raped multiple times during a week, just moving from A to B, will be very happy about an armed group granting her just a minimum protection, by which she is not raped anymore, not to that extent. It comes at a cost, of course. These services, they're not for free. It comes at a cost for that woman, but for the society as a whole at the same time. But in the equation of what I need right now, not being raped, being able to feed my children, having a job that allows me to care about my children and my elderly as well, the consideration is better this than nothing. Since the state is not doing anything, what I'm going to basically do is turn to these other illegal actors that are offering somewhat that service, although at a price. So you see, the question is then, why the mafia in Germany? What's the need of the population and society? What is the setting? Do you see any of it and think immediately of Germany? No, and most of the studies, in fact, are in Latin America, are in other parts of the world that are characterized by exactly these conditions. And so nobody studied the mafia in Germany before, but then we have the mafia in Germany, so why is it the case? And this is the puzzle, right? Now, one of the answers could be maybe it's not really there. Maybe it's just an alarmist, the news, we say it's there, but it's not really there. Maybe it's not really a mafia. Maybe once it gets there, it becomes something different. And so we don't have that problem anymore. Maybe we have the wrong theories. Maybe all the theories that we've just been dealing with just don't work. And that was the beginning of my PhD, basically. And beyond Germany, that I took as a case study, what I managed to do in the past years, I brought it a little bit further and turned it into a book, trying to understand the general puzzle that is broader than just the mafia in Germany, is why have mafias expanded and entrenched themselves in settings that should not be conducive to their presence. And actually, you can think about that, even deleting the term mafia and substituting it to organized crime or specific type of governance type organized crime, if we don't want to just limit ourselves to mafias. So solving the puzzle step one, documenting mafia presence. Well, I operate very much in the field. 45 interviews. It's not about the number. It's very much about how much you can then keep the relationship with the people that you interviewed as well. So I tried as much as possible to keep that relationship. I interviewed people across Italy, Germany, and Switzerland. Switzerland might seem strange, but one of my case studies was across the border, so you have to expand, even if it sounds a little bit messy in terms of how clean the research design is. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but if you have questions, I'm very happy to answer those. I think one really important thing is fieldwork is just way more than conducting interviews. It's about understanding the location. It's about understanding the geography. Even if you're not going to write about it, it basically gives you all the background that you need in order to, as much as you can, interpret and have a background to the sources that you're going to evaluate afterwards. And first thing, that was my challenge, find the sources. Nobody had studied from an empirical point of view the mafia in Germany. I didn't know where the sources were. There's no repository where you can download it. Where do you begin? How do you find the sources in the first place? It's not impossible to access the type of sources that I've accessed, but I didn't even know they existed. You have to first find them. You have to first know, and they literally sometimes just sit in an office. You go there with a USB stick. But if you don't know that that office there has exactly that case that you need, well, then nobody's going to study it. So fieldwork is really important also to just find the sources. What type of sources I work with? Well, the best are court files, indictments. This is kind of like the information package that the police is putting together and giving to the prosecutor in order to then make the prosecution case. It's the best type of data because it's where you have more information. And the type of information I'm interested in mainly is transcription of intercepts. Like this is in Italian. I mainly work with Italian data. Here you can see different mafiosi that talk with each other, right? And so this is primary sources. It's really rare to find such an unbiased, in a sense, screenshot of how two criminals talk with each other. Of course, it's still biased data because it's exactly that screenshot that the prosecution thought it's relevant for the case. So you will have to bear that in mind. But this kind of and I don't know why sometimes the Italian prosecutor just put a lot of stuff in there for no reason. So sometimes you would have, conversations about what they're doing for a Sunday, meeting or what face cream they use. I don't know why it's in there, but you would find random stuff that make absolutely no sense for a criminal case in my eyes. But then you never know. I also work with witness statements. Anything really, be creative. Whatever comes through your desk, you're going to try to analyze. Also, open data or semi-open data, business registry entries. I wanted to know what companies they own when they're operating in Germany. So this is business registry data. Once you have the names, you can basically find the company, sales contracts, quite interesting. After the fall of the Berlin Wall, I tried to understand whether some of these mafiosi were trying to buy enlarge as a result of basically a lot of public property being put on the market. So this is an original sales contract. So the first one that I found that could be connected to a mafia member. But the answer is no, they didn't really take advantage of it. But still, I checked it. And so really, this is just to say that there is a lot of data out there. You just have to basically collect it, first find it, and then try to analyze it. What is the first result that I can give you? Well, this is an interesting map. It's a map that has been put together by the Federal Police Office after the shooting that we talked about, that you saw previously, where we found the little image of San Michael. And this is where they mapped all the Ndrangheta clan that were in Germany at that point in time. The funny thing is, before that, they would say that Ndrangheta is not in Germany. And then suddenly the killing happens and poof, look at this. We have a lot of clans that seem to have been there for quite some time. And in fact, they were. So we're speaking about a structured presence, outposts, criminal groups that are directly linked to a parent group in Calabria. We are speaking about a sustained presence. So since the 70s, it depends and it varies from group to group. But the first group that we can document, or that I can document at least, was already set up in the 70s. Individual mafiosi might have arrived earlier. That's a possibility. And we see geographically distributed across the territory, although we have hubs. Don't be fooled by the fact that we do have basically an empty spot up there. This is still biased data. This is not even like a third of what is going on. It was the first really image that German authorities tried to put together in 2008. And I just wanted to show it to you. It is biased, though, very much in the sense that it's just limited in what it contains. And since we are on the topic of limited data, this is also an overview of the, so this is a leaked document, right? So this is the one that we are not supposed to have. But this is data that is public. But what you see also is a quite difficult picture here, is the fact that they started to collect or to publish this data in 2008. So we know that the first presence of the Ndrangheta is already in the 70s. What happened between the 70s and 2008? Well, in 2007, the Duisburg shooting, and what you can see here is the number of alleged members of the different mafia organizations in Germany. In blue, the Ndrangheta, and here you have Cosa Nostra, Sacra Corona Unita, and Camorra. And what you can see is, well, either suddenly after the shooting, a lot of Calabrian mafiosi ran to Germany for whatever reason, or basically we set the police focus on the Ndrangheta, and that's why we see absolutely no development here. We see an increased steep development there. What can we do with this data? Pretty much nothing. We only know now that the Ndrangheta has become a priority for law enforcement, while the other mafias had not. And even when it comes to internal consistency of the data, if we take 2019, for example, the German Federal Police Office speaks of 344 alleged members of the Ndrangheta. The government, who in theory has no data which is separate from the federal police, speaks of up to 1,000. And if we look at independent analysis, which should be based on state police offices still, in 2007, already we're speaking of 1,200. So you can see here, what do we even do with this data? Well, one could even argue, is it important? Is it important whether there are 400, 500, 1,000 members? Does it really make a difference? Well, maybe I think it does. I think it does in the sense that it shows you how little actually about the phenomenon is known by the side of law enforcement itself. But it's true, it doesn't tell us what these groups do. We do not know what that means completely. And so this brought me to the second step of solving the puzzle, which is trying to understand what these groups really do. And I worked on 3 different case studies, one in West Germany, 198 individuals between Italy and Germany. So I said, whenever we are looking at a mafia group operating in Germany, what you have is you have a connection to a parent group in Calabria. So we have 28 companies in this case that are connected to this group, first active in the 70s, still active today. Second case study, we have 154 individuals. These are mainly in Germany, 87 companies, first active in the 1990s, because, I mean, before it was not possible because of the fall of the Berlin Wall, but so they were in West Germany before that, but they were not really coming together as a group. And the last case, we have only 57 individuals. 3 companies is the one on the borders and here with Switzerland. And it was first active in the 80s and then inactive between 2008 and 16. What we have here is extortion, control of drug markets in the first case. What we have in the second case is money laundering and investments in the legal economy. And the last one, inactivity, which is of interest. This was my control group when I started designing the research, but it turned into a category, an analytical category in itself, as we will see in a second. And so this is mainly when people start studying mafia expansion, or criminal mobility would be the term in the literature, they find something like this. So they find situations in which you have extortion and then other groups move and do drugs, and other groups move and do just money laundering. Some do nothing. And so what happens, having these results from an empirical point of view, is basically a lot of debates. A lot of debates and disagreements. It is one of the core questions in the study of organized crime itself. Already in 1967, Cressy, who was one of the founding fathers of the study of organized crime, basically started the field by asking the question, why do we have the Sicilian mafia in the United States? And this is where we started to basically look into this. But then after the year 2000, basically there has been a whole field that was very much, let's say, in disagreement one with another, because Some said, well, it's not really expansion. If it is money laundering, it's not the same as drugs, and it's not really governance. Is it governance? Back and forth. We had a lot of terminology: infiltration, hybridization, functional diversification, transplantation. There's more than that. Everyone came up with a new label to explain this mess here. So one point is that most of the confusion is arising from analyzing structure and activity, either together, conflating them, or just one of the two, ignoring the other. And what I do, or what I try to do in my work, is to distinguish the two clearly, but then analyzing them at the same time. What is structure within the context of expansion of criminal mobility? It's the capacity by a criminal group to set up and operate an outpost in a new territory over a sustained period of time. What is activity? Well, that's the question, right? What activity? We can assign the activity. And the analytical categories that I came up with are based on the literature, governance, Varese, and the whole scholarship that we talked about before, trade. Paolo Campana, who's at the Institute here as well, has been looking at this specific case when it comes to mafia expansion. And the third case, the one of hibernation, that so far as I know, nobody has been looking at. Exactly for that very reason that we've never really took apart and separated structure from activity. How does it look like? It looks like a continuum. So now if you imagine, I'm a criminal group, there's a structure in the new territory, and it will at any point in time be somewhere along this continuum. It will be closer to governance, possibly, when we see and observe attempts to control markets, territories, or communities. Remember, when we talked about it during the theory part, it will be just trading on a market. When we see the presence on the market activity, either legal or illegal, it doesn't matter, but we do not have that very specific aspect of control or monopoly. And we have hibernation, which is very much the stage at which we have an actor which is doing nothing and could wake up or not wake up anymore. We have hibernation when we have a structure, but we have inactivity, which is a situation that, practically speaking, does happen quite often. And I will come back to this to explain why this is relevant and why it is relevant that more research is done exactly on hibernation and has not been done yet as we speak. But before doing that, this all sounds a little bit abstract, right? So we're going to look at what this completely means. We're going to look at, can I move this? Because I think he has quite an interesting face. We're going to look at the cases, and we're going to look what I mean by governance, by trade, and by hibernation. This is Giuseppe Farao. He sits in prison in Italy, probably will be there for his entire life. He's still the boss of the Farao plan and then the Farao outpost, and he's managing all the activities from prison, so that's not a problem for him. This is an outpost that I've put in the category of governance that Varese has been proposing under the name of label of transplantation. He arrived himself in Germany in the 70s. In the 80s, we have proof that the cell was set up and operated, and it is still operational today. We are looking at their presence in both the illegal and legal markets. So in the 80s and 90s, what we have is mainly activity in drug markets, and they wanted to control them. Remember the example that I've given you? This comes from a witness statement. This was an affiliate. So it has gone through the whole affiliation ritual. Part of the Ndrangheta moved to Germany exactly to develop that business on behalf of Giuseppe Farao. He then decided to collaborate with police and gave these very interesting witness statements, really amazing data. And he said, our task was to identify the drug market in and around Weidingen in order to take it over. We had to convince everyone to buy drugs exclusively from us, otherwise they would have had trouble. The boss told us he could provide weapons if necessary. So what we see here is really what the theory predicts. Take it over exclusively, the monopoly, so that element of governance. They are the one that decide who can sell. In the meantime, I was able to find, I'm not sure whether this is complete, but it's still telling us something, criminal proceedings between 1982 and 2002 mainly. We have 2007 with one exception in 2002, where we have mainly accusations related to drug and weapon-related offenses. We have a little bit of everything, though, as well. Arson, robbery, fraud, money laundering is the case in 2002. And then we have no records anymore. We've seen a wave of arrests. That's why we have the criminal proceedings. Some of them went to prison, mostly for a few months, not more. But then this group basically disappeared. And we could have thought that was really great police work, right? So they found out there's a mafia group there, they investigated, they arrested the members, and now they're not doing anything anymore. Only that in 2017, they reappeared suddenly in the gastronomy sector. So it's not drug markets anymore, no weapons, no arson, but it's these little nice Italian restaurants and the import and export of Italian products. Only that they didn't just turn into honest entrepreneurs. Now we have his son, which is dealing with the market in Germany. And what they're trying to do is trying to monopolize import-export from Calabria. So we have the same governance or monopoly element. Here, an intercepted conversation between two mafiosi, and they actually complained about him. They complained that there was not a free market. And they said, all the food products have to go through him in Germany. The wine goes through him, the fish goes through him, the pasta goes through him, the coffee goes through him. No one can sell in Germany without talking to him. So they were very much complaining because they wanted to sell in Germany as well, but it was impossible. And so what you see here is operating on the legal market, but still that element of monopoly and of criminal governance. What we also saw is a protection racket in Germany, again, through the gastronomy sector. And here we have wine delivery to Calabrian restaurant owners. They are in Germany, so imagine a restaurant like this one. Then a wine delivery would arrive. The owner comes in front of his restaurant, and then he has a pallet of wine, 50 cartons or so of wine, boxes of wine. And then the restaurant owner doesn't know where the wine comes from, picks up the phone, there is of course a phone number, and says, no, I will not take the wine. What did you do? Why did you send me the wine? I will not take it. I have never ordered it. I only take the wine I need. What happens at this point? This person, the son of the boss again, becomes relevant. He calls, phone call by the son of the boss, and what's the answer of the restaurant owner? No, I never rejected the wine because I know my friends. Don't worry, Vito is his name. Whenever you call me, I'm at your disposal. So you see the difference, right? You see here, he didn't know who was selling the wine. Here, he knows. And what we have in here is no crime. Where's the crime? Where's the threat? When I was speaking to the police officer on the case, we just didn't know what this was about. What's the problem? The wine was paid, the price was not too high. Yes, they had a disagreement about who was exactly sending the wine. The problem is that he's the son of the boss. The problem is that he is a Calabrian immigrant that comes from the same region. The problem is that he has family back in Calabria, and there will be consequences if he doesn't take the wine. Now, of course, this is only possible through the connection with Calabria, but this is happening in Germany. And not only is it happening in Germany it is not a crime. So from the point of view of the mafioso, this is just ideal. Now, what the police did is give all the evidence to Italy, hoping that Italy will be able to prosecute the case. But they said, this is literally just not a crime in Germany. We can't do anything. We can't even continue surveillance on this space. No competition allowed. It goes even broader. So it's not just a problem of the diaspora community. And what we have here, same clan, different situation. We have a German entrepreneur, and he wanted to open an ice cream shop. It was in a little village, relatively little village. And the problem was that in that village, we had already an ice cream shop, and that ice cream shop was owned by the clan. And so that was not good. So the German entrepreneur got approached, and this is the instruction that the boss gave in order to threaten him. Tell him to think of Duisburg. Remember Duisburg? The shooting, it was everywhere on the news at the time. That way he understands how he will end up. So this is just to give you also a little bit of an idea that this is, of course, taking place within the diaspora community, but it moves beyond the diaspora community, and it still has an element of threat, which is quite concrete. In the diaspora community, it's implicit. if you go out of it, it becomes a little bit more explicit. So this would be enough to be considered a threat by the police and by the prosecutor. So this is governance for you, governance of a Calabrian mafia clan in Germany. But it's not always the case. This is not every group in Germany is actually doing exactly this. And this is a case of trade instead of what Paolo Campana has called functional diversification. It's a case of a group that is related to some of these families that I talked about, some of these families that already come up in the data of the 19th century, still today are in San Luca, to a certain extent involved in the same shooting that we talked about. But this time they moved to East Germany, and what they do there is really mainly just money laundering or investments in the legal economy. We do not have any evidence, or just one evidence coming up that came up with the messaging system. I'm very happy about a little bit of drug trafficking as well. But that's very recent, so we didn't know about that. And today we will just speak about the money laundering investment bit. This is me trying the spritz that, well, these alleged mafiosi, because they've never been brought to trial, to court either, are serving very good spritz, by the way. So it's not true that the food is not good or that the alcohol is not good. It's really, really good. This is field work too. So for all the students, if you want to have some fun during field work, it's a good pretest to study the mafia. So we have investments in the legal economy. We have no evidence of monopoly here, though. We could have had, as in the previous case, but we simply don't. What we know, though, that it's a system. That's what they say themselves. They speak of a system of investments, of a 007 operation, because they also like to be a bit cool, or they think of themselves as being really cool. A structure in which everyone has a specific function, which is really interesting, and within which the Calabrians, they call themselves the Calabrians, stay hidden behind and put in all the money. So this is why we are speaking about money laundering. Of course, there's more evidence than just this. I found this little intercept incredibly interesting. Here we have two members of the outpost that are speaking to each other, and they say this: in Erfurt, we keep what we already have. Leipzig has a future because it is still virgin. We also keep the contacts for Dresden. The Leipzig project is long-term. These are all cities in Germany, and the group is mainly located in Erfurt, but not only. In 2015, we have evidence of investments in 39 businesses in Erfurt, 11 in Leipzig, and 4 in Dresden. So they did execute the plan. Maybe they don't always do necessarily all the time, but in this case, they did. Last year, I continued looking for the companies. We now have 85 companies connected to this group, 57 restaurants, bars, or ice cream shops, 22 individual companies, and 6 other companies. And what we're trying to do is a network analysis on the corporate networks behind these investments. And this is just a little note to go back to the importance to look at the difference between structure and activity. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to see whether the corporate network behind an activity which is governance-based is different from one that is trade-based. And with this data, it's just really a side note that when you start collecting this data, you can really do quite some interesting work. This is the largest component, how it looks like in Germany. And who knows, maybe in the next few years, we will be able to collect more companies. And you can do that, by the way, with publicly available data once you have a set of names that you can check. But this is it really. This is the trade part, right? And this is very often underestimated because it's always reduced to money laundering. Oh, it's just a money laundering presence. But I'm actually just writing an article about this, that I think they're underestimating money laundering by only treating it as a technical question instead of really trying to understand what it means for all these companies, for all these people that are part of a criminal organization to suddenly turn up in our societies, managing places like this one here, which, by the way, was renovated at the tune of £400,000. The equivalent was 800,000. I don't remember exactly, but it was in Deutschmark after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the money was very much welcomed by the mayor, who said, I have no idea where it comes from, but who is investing money here right now? I don't know, so I take it. And this is still there. It's still the same restaurant just next to the city council, and they don't even own the building because the Chamber of Guilds owns the building. So why they invested all that money in there, nobody knows. But this is how trade looks like when a mafia organization is moving and expanding abroad. Now, this is my favorite case. It's my favorite case. These two men over here are the heads of two clusters, two outposts, one on the German side of the Lake Constance. This is the Lake Constance. And one on the Swiss side. And actually, they're only 32 kilometers away. It's also one of my favorite cases because, in fact, Italian authorities didn't really understand the distance between the two, which I found quite cute. And so they thought that actually these are completely unrelated organizations, and came to the conclusion that it wasn't the case when they realized that, in fact, even if one is from Switzerland, the other one is from Germany, they're very close to each other. It's an interesting case because the two started to fight over who has the right to control this area. And one of the questions was also, do borders matter? Which I find very, very interesting. So they started to basically argue, well, but if I'm in Switzerland, I'm allowed to be independent in Switzerland because you are in Germany. And someone else would argue, well, why do borders matter to us? We are just in Ndrangheta, we are the organization, so borders shouldn't matter. But we're not going to talk about this right now. I told you a little bit about it because as a result of this fight, a lot of authorities in Germany, Switzerland, and Italy got alerted. They were very scared that what would happen is a mafia could be used. And as a result of that, we have a lot of data, really, really a lot of data. And we are able to prove structural presence, although there was a period of inactivity. And we're able to prove with some sort of, let's say, certainty that this is the case. Let me just tell you why. How can we prove that there was really a structure there? As I said, we have really a lot of intercepts, some of which are really quite funny as well, in which these groups speak about themselves and exactly where they stand in the hierarchy. The boss of the German cluster was just saying, it's been 7 years that my society, remember society is how they refer to their own group, responds to the Krimine. The Krimine is the upper coordination body of the Ndrangheta. We haven't looked at the whole organizational structure of the Ndrangheta, which is quite complex, but the Krimine is the top. And what he's saying here, I have a society, I have a group, and I've been responding, which means I've been answering, I've been under the hierarchy for 7 years, directly subordinated to Calabria. They can go to the Krimine and ask. The boss of the Swiss cluster said, our society has been formed for 40 years. It's been 40 years that this locale, they also call it locale, has been responding to Calabria. So same exact facts. And we have so much more of this. Because they were basically trying to prove the point of who was more important in the hierarchies and who was winning the fight. So we know that we have a structural presence. We are pretty certain they are part of the Ndrangheta for how they speak, how they say it, self-incriminating, right? We even have a ritual that has been filmed by the police. You can't see it really well, but you can Google it and you can see the whole video has been leaked to the press. And I find it interesting that in that constellation, the boss said, I would like you to remember the rules that have existed since 1830. So remember when I said we're never sure exactly when the organization started. We have the first proof in 1888. Here is a reference to rules that existed since the 1830s. I mean, we don't know. We also don't know how well they know their own rules. But so we do know that this is an Ndrangheta group. We know that it's there. However, we found no evidence of criminally relevant activity, nothing significant. I think they found like 2 grams of cocaine or so. I mean, it's probably for personal use. If not, this is not really what we're talking about. Although we had investigations. So we had 5 different investigations from the Italian side and at least 2 that I know of, which is more difficult to actually cover them in Germany and Switzerland. And the result, the German prosecutor that I interviewed told me this. The investigators were desperate. They tried everything and uncovered all there was to uncover. Yes, there was some sensational transcripts. One was not often had the chance to witness a mafia ritual, but that was it. They did not engage in any criminal activity. Nothing we could see, at least. Nothing, no drugs, no extortion, no robberies, nothing at all. And they had undercover agents as well. So it was really well documented. So this is hibernation, right? So we have a group. We have a structure, but we have inactivity. This is also a category that is virtually absent in the sense that certainly it is absent from an analytical point of view. If we start thinking about it, we might actually find evidence of this kind of case studies somewhere else as well. Why? Because it's difficult to find evidence. Ultimately, we work with judicial data. One way or another, we are going to work with judicial data. And judicial data is based on activity. If I have no suspicion to investigate, then I cannot investigate further. And so this situation in which having structure but not having activity is an incredibly rare find. However, my argument is that it's incredibly interesting and important to study as well. Why? Because it speaks to some of the core debates that we find in the field of studies within organized crime, but I think criminology widely speaking. So in this case even, I am not 100% sure that we are talking about evidence of absence or absence of evidence. I can't be 100% sure. And one could say, maybe you get this awkward case because of stigma. You basically say, these are Calabrians, they speak in a certain way, they like to, this is actually the case that the defense attorney made, then won on this ground. But this has nothing to do with the mafia, because the mafia is defined by its activity, not by its structure. Right? So maybe we're not understanding that this has nothing to do with a criminal organization. It's just a stigma that we attach to Calabrian people. But maybe there's policing blind spots as well. As we've seen with the case of extortion against Calabrian restaurant owners, it's simply not a crime in Germany. Then you're going to have inactivity to a certain extent. The question of whether inactive mafiosi are still mafiosi, again, structure versus activity, but as well from a policy point of view. Because do we want to really, we know that membership is for life. It's a lifelong commitment. But what if you stop being a mafioso? Do I want to criminalize you? Is this what we want from our justice system? To criminalize someone just because he underwent, because it's no women, so it's always a he, underwent an affiliation ritual, and therefore for life? We know that, for example, when it comes to a terrorist organization, membership can be criminalized. With mafia organization in Italy, to a certain extent, this is the case as well. Do we want to go in that direction for any kind of criminal group or not? It's not that easy to answer. And it is by looking at these cases that we can actually start moving forward a little bit, reflecting on what this means. And just to give you another example, when I was presenting this I was presenting just an hibernation in Athens at the European Society of Criminology. And after the presentation, a researcher working with the prosecutions in the Netherlands came to me and he said, this is our problem right now, because what happened is that we've criminalized the motorcycle gangs. But we've done that all together. So now, within these motorcycle gangs, we have some that commit crime and some that don't. And we have a complete confusion between a structure, which is one, and activity or criminal activity, which not always overlaps with the structure. And so he said he wants to work on this because sometimes exactly within the policy debate, these distinctions in structure and activity is really important. And looking at this apparently paradoxical cases of hibernation could be really interesting. Let me see. Oh, shit. Sorry. So just to, because this is problem, you have to know about me one really important piece of information, which is that I was born in Switzerland and raised in Italy, which means I speak too much from my Italian side, but I worry a lot about speaking too much, and that's my Swiss side. So this is tension. But I hope that now we have a little bit a better idea of why it's important to keep structure and activity separated. And at an empirical level, I will never have a complete case of hibernation, or typically not, or governance or trade. I would probably be somewhere here or somewhere there. But we know now how to make sense from an analytical point of view of these different manifestations of mafia expansion. And so all that debate, all that disagreement that there was in the literature, in fact, everyone was right in a sense. You just had to organize it from an analytical perspective. And that's what I hope my book did, and the framework I provided did. I still owe you an explanation, and in roughly 5 minutes to 10 minutes. So why do we find the mafia, whether as a governance type organization, trade type, or hibernate in Germany? And I could give you many, many different explanations, but I thought we go back to the origins. This is a brilliant book that I advise to read about the Sicilian mafia with a social scientist, who basically explains the resilience of mafia in one way that I think still today holds true and can be applied to many different settings. And he said that the mafia market has its own intrinsic tenacity because it's an equilibrium. No one has an immediate interest to behave differently and fight it, even if one sees its drawbacks. So we have two elements here. We have an interest and we have a drawback. You remember at the beginning when I said this is a service, right, that is offered because there is a demand for that service. So we have an interest, and that service comes at a cost. That would be the drawback. And when is there equilibrium? When basically I accept the costs because my interest or benefits, I consider this to basically be still beneficial to myself. Now, when we look at Germany, at an individual level, and I'm coming back to this in a second, we do see the interest, converging interest at the individual level. However, what we see at the contextual level is myopia. So let's go back 1 second. Even if one sees its drawbacks, the question is, what if you don't see it? What if, for whatever reason, you only see the interest and you're systematically underestimating the drawbacks? And I think that this is what is happening in Germany. What is myopia? Well, it's a blurry vision, you can't see, right? So you need glasses, but this is myopia, is this, right? Is suddenly all of these clans pop up as soon as you put on the glasses after a murder has happened. But it's also an analytical term used in organizational studies, organizational myopia, which is the limited capacity to evaluate the facts in the present as they are, and in terms of the possible evolutions. And this is the problem that we're having here. And organizations can be societies and can be institutions. So this is widely speaking a problem that has been analyzed, never applied really to this context, but has been analyzed and basically has been used as an explanation to predict or to explain why a lot of disasters within certain societies have happened, because there was a knowledge gap. There was this, for whatever reason, we couldn't really assess properly what was in front of our eyes. Maybe because it's difficult to reconnect this image to the image of the mafia that one might have, but I think it goes beyond that. And certainly when we speak about institutional myopia, we have structural conditions that can explain it. The institutional setup in Germany, the federal system, which makes internal and international cooperation more difficult. Legislative loopholes in Germany, again, anti-money laundering is the problem, or this problem that I talked about, implicit intimidation, is really difficult to demonstrate in court, which basically translates into policing blind spots, and also legislative constraints per se. So it's not a loophole, it's just simply, for example, a very strict privacy law for historical reasons, which make intelligence and structural investigations into structures quite difficult. Every country will have a slightly different set of reasons why we are myopic in that sense. And that's why I think this concept of myopia is quite interesting. It's not just structural. There's also something that has been labeled as organizational hubris, and I find it really interesting because it describes the confidence and excessive pride from past successes that brings these institutions into a state of false security and therefore translates into persistence of organizational beliefs and practices, so there is inertia. Nothing is done to address this. Because these are all elements that could be addressed. One could do something about this. The state in Germany is not dysfunctional. You can address all these weaknesses. You don't have to address all of them, but you can certainly work on many of those. Why don't you do that? Because of this. Because you don't think like you don't perceive that this is necessary. This is a state of false security that basically pushes these institutions into inertia. And that's why from 1970 to 2007, you could look at many different declarations by police officers, Ministry of Interiors, whether you prosecute this day, the market is just not in Germany. One killing gets to the news, and then suddenly we have, this map popping up. How is this even possible? And I think that this hubris is a really important element that one needs to understand, especially when one designs policy then in the end, right? Because it would be easy here to have a policy recommendation package, but if you don't take into consideration that this will not be accepted, will not be debated in Parliament, in that we will not get this fixed at all. Now we have a second problem though. The problem is trust. trust that we think that societies which have high levels of trust and moderate levels of trust among themselves and to the state are kind of immune or stronger when it comes to certain forms of organized crime. And what we can see here is that because of institutional inertia to begin with, within a context of trust towards institution, what we have is that this myopia that is within institution transfers to society. So I, as put in very simple terms, as the society in Germany does not believe that the mafia is there because otherwise the state would have done something about it. And if the state is not doing something about it, then it means it's not here. This is the statement by the person that has been threatened. I went and interviewed him threatened by the clan when he tried to open the ice cream shop. And he said, I could not imagine that something like this can happen in Germany. It was inconceivable. This is Germany, a free country, and there are such structures. Something like this exists in Italy is well known, extortion and so on, but not here in Germany, not to this extent. I could have never imagined. So a little bit of hubris, you can see it here as well. It's like this is something that belongs to Italy. It just doesn't belong to me. And I interviewed many other people, and basically you would get the same statement. And also because I don't have much time, we're not going to go into this statement, which I have cut just basically half an hour because coming here. I'm very happy I did that. But this gives you an idea. So now we don't only have the myopia, we also have converging interests. And so while the myopia is something very specific to established democracies, the converging of interest is something that's actually way more broad, and it's exactly what Ndrangheta found in the case of the Sicilian mafia, only that we find it in Germany as well. There are many cases, although I have to say anecdotal, of converging interests within society and institutions. We have accountants that work for these companies. In total, what do we have now? More than 100 companies just across 2 case studies. We have secretaries, we have notaries, we have other businesses. We have people that agreed, for example, to just basically install cashiers in order to commit fraud within the restaurant. They knew what they were getting into. They had no problem with it. We have local mayors, politicians, judiciary, and now even a case of police cooperation with Italian mafias. They're all anecdotal, so you cannot actually make a claim about the prevalence of the cases, but they all exist. And this is an incredibly interesting document just published, or I'm not sure whether it's published, but I'm sure that it will soon be published if it isn't published. 600 pages in which basically you find all of these cases summarized in relation to the Erfurt group, which is one of the case studies that we looked at when it comes to money laundering. Here's just 2 examples. One mayor I spoke to, he said, as city council, we obviously had a huge interest in making the restaurant work. This is a restaurant that was connected to a mafioso, and we applied for EU funding together, of course. Then the guy was arrested and now sits in prison. Mayor 2, they want to make money. We want to collect taxes. What is wrong with that? Right? This is the approach. Now, are we speaking about corruption? Are we speaking about complicity? It's very difficult to tell. I think still the best term is just interests that are converging. There is just a common interest. And what myopia contributes here is it gives a level of plausible deniability, which basically means that also you will not be prosecuted in court, and an underestimation of the costs. Do you remember the equation that in the Sicilian Mafia book? So you have an interest and you have basically the drawback, which is the cost associated with it. Myopia is making you underestimate the cost. So this is not a question of whether you knew whether you were collaborating with the mafia. Even if you did not understand what that really was about. You would have this image of the mafia, which is completely detached from the reality of the criminal organization. And as a result of that, we're going to have a likelihood of getting into this form of informal arrangement, which is higher, exactly because there is this underestimation of costs, which is related to myopia. So because I think this is sometimes a bit complex or contorted, so I just put it down as to summarize again, institutional myopia leads to institutional inertia through trust and then transforms into societal myopia. That helps entrenchment. On the other hand, what we have is converging interests within segments of society and institutions, which of course then is feeding back into the mafia again. And this is a cycle that we find that explains why we are having the mafia today in Germany, and seemingly none of the interventions that we've seen so far had any result. This is just a footnote. I actually checked many other hypotheses that would explain the presence of the mafia in Germany. You will have to read the book if you want to know about them or ask about them. I know that I've also overrun my time. I just hope that why is the mafia in Germany is a question that you're now able to answer a little bit. Is it not really there? I hope I made the case that it is there. Is it not really a mafia? Depends, be my guest in how you define it, but remind that you have to just distinguish between structure and activity. Do we have the wrong theories? No, we just apply them to the wrong context, and we assumed that the same theory in different contexts would work. And now we just basically realize that this was not the case, but that doesn't make the theories that we have wrong per se. What are the contributions? Well, this is a book about mafia expansion in established democracies. So 2 types of contributions. Under mafia expansion, the framework that we talked about, again, structure and activity, hibernation as a new category for future research, and within the context of established democracies, how organizational myopia plays or interplay between organizational myopia and interests when it comes to the relationship between criminal actors and state and society. So this is more from a theoretical or analytical point of view, but it has a policy relevance, and this is for anyone here who is thinking about doing work on organized crime. It does have a lot of policy impact. I don't want to go into that, but there was a point in my PhD where I was quite depressed and nobody really understood anything about Ndrangheta, which is such a niche topic, and then suddenly interest started to come, and I've given witness statement in the first anti-mafia parliamentary inquiry in Germany, expert report for the police, and then even the dissertation and the report were included in one of the most high-profile trial against Ndrangheta. Training briefings, as Manuel mentioned, for different government agencies, and now broadening out of the specific topic also within the UN ODC. So for all the students that are thinking about doing work in this area, it is a very niche area, but it has a very large impact when it comes to policy. Thank you very much. Sorry for taking too much time.